Assalamu alaikum and welcome to the final episode of Ottoman Empire series on AI Deen Vision. Today we conclude our series with perhaps one of the most dramatic transformations in Islamic history, the creation of modern Turkey from the ashes of the Ottoman Empire. The year 1923 marks a pivotal moment in Islamic history, the birth of the Turkish Republic from the remnants of what was once one of the world's greatest Islamic empires. This transition represents not just a change of government, but a fundamental reimagining of what an Islamic society could become in the modern age. The transformation we'll explore today continues to shape geopolitics, Islamic discourse, and questions of tradition versus modernity throughout the Muslim world. As we close our series, we'll examine how the decisions made during this critical period continue to reverberate a century later. This is the story of how, through the determination of one extraordinary leader and a people who refused to disappear from the world stage, a new nation emerged that would chart a unique path between East and West, tradition and modernity. This is the creation of modern Turkey. As 1923 began, the Turkish people stood at a crossroads of history. Behind them lay 6 centuries of Ottoman imperial rule and a devastating world war that had nearly led to their complete subjugation. Ahead lay an uncertain future, but one they were determined to shape on their own terms. The Treaty of Lausanne, signed on July 24, 1923, represented a diplomatic triumph for the Turkish national movement led by Mustafa Kemal. Unlike the humiliating Treaty of Sèvres from 1920 that had sought to partition Turkish lands among foreign powers, Lausanne recognized Turkey as a sovereign independent state with internationally recognized borders. This treaty established most of the borders of modern Turkey, settled the status of minorities, and ended the economic capitulations that had given foreign powers special privileges within Turkish territory. Most importantly, it confirmed that Anatolia and Eastern Thrace would remain Turkish, and that Istanbul, though demilitarized, would remain under Turkish control. With international recognition secured, Mustafa Kemal and his colleagues moved quickly to formalize the new political order. On October 29, 1923, the Grand National Assembly formally declared Turkey a republic, with Ankara, not Istanbul, as its capital. This symbolic break with the imperial past announced that this would be a new kind of Turkish state. Mustafa Kemal was unanimously elected as the first president of the republic. The enigmatic leader, who would later adopt the surname Atatürk, father of Turks, had a clear vision. Turkey would never again be the sick man at the mercy of European powers. To ensure this, he initiated one of history's most ambitious modernization projects. The new leader faced enormous challenges. The population was overwhelmingly rural and largely illiterate. The economy was in shambles after years of war. Religious institutions held tremendous influence over daily life, and many Turks still identified primarily as Muslims rather than as citizens of a nation-state. Kemal's first symbolic move was establishing Ankara as the capital instead of Istanbul. This wasn't merely administrative, it represented a psychological break with the Ottoman past and its associations with imperial defeat. While Istanbul looked toward Europe and Asia with its cosmopolitan history, Ankara represented the heart of Turkish Anatolia. In 1924, Kemal took his most controversial step, abolishing the Islamic Caliphate. For 400 years, the Ottoman sultans had claimed the title of Caliph, making them not just political leaders but spiritual heads of the global Muslim community. With one legislative act, a religious institution that had existed since the Weasal Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, was eliminated. The abolition of the Caliphate was just the beginning of Kemal's secularization program. Religious courts were closed, the Ministry of Religious Affairs was disbanded, Sufi orders were officially banned. Religious schools, madrasas, were replaced with a unified national education system based on secular principles. On March 3, 1924, the Grand National Assembly passed a series of laws that fundamentally transformed Turkey's relationship with Islam. These included the law on unification of education, which placed all schools under state control, and the abolition of the office of SECULARISM, the highest religious authority in the Ottoman system. Kemal's reforms quickly extended to changing the very appearance of Turkish citizens. In 1925, the hat law banned the traditional fez, replacing it with Western-style hats. Kemal himself toured the country modeling Western dress, famously declaring, "The civilized international dress is worthy and appropriate for our nation, and we will wear it." Even time itself was reformed. In 1925, Turkey adopted the Gregorian calendar used in the West, replacing the Islamic calendar. The weekly holiday was changed from Friday to Sunday. In 1926, Turkey adopted the 24-hour international clock system rather than the traditional Islamic timing of prayers. Perhaps most consequential for daily life was the comprehensive legal reform of 1926. The Swiss Civil Code replaced Islamic law, Sharia, fundamentally changing matters of marriage, divorce, inheritance, and commerce. This was followed by adoption of Italian Criminal Code and German Commercial Code. One of the most progressive aspects of these legal reforms was their impact on women's rights. Polygamy was abolished. Women gained equal rights to divorce and inheritance. The minimum age for marriage was raised. In a region where gender segregation was common, these changes were revolutionary. In November 1928, Kemal introduced what may have been his most far-reaching cultural reform: the adoption of a new Latin-based alphabet to replace the Arabic script that had been used for centuries. Kemal personally toured the country giving lessons in the new alphabet, sometimes teaching in village squares with a blackboard. This alphabetical revolution had profound consequences. It symbolically severed ties with the Ottoman Islamic past and oriented Turkish culture toward the West. It also rendered the entire adult population functionally illiterate overnight. Newspapers, books, and official documents suddenly became unreadable to those not trained in the new script. The alphabet reform was accompanied by a systematic effort to purify the Turkish language by removing Arabic and Persian loanwords and replacing them with Turkish equivalents, sometimes reviving ancient Turkic terms or inventing new ones. The Turkish Language Association, founded in 1932, spearheaded this linguistic revolution. These language reforms weren't merely technical. They were central to creating a new national identity based on Turkish ethnicity rather than Islam. The Turkish Historical Society, also established in 1932, promoted a historical narrative that emphasized pre-Islamic Turkish civilizations and downplayed the Ottoman Islamic era. Economically, Kemal pursued a policy of state-led industrialization known as etatism. In 1934, Turkey launched its first five-year plan, establishing state enterprises in textiles, paper, cement, steel, and chemicals. New railroads connected formerly isolated Anatolian towns to the national economy. Despite the global Great Depression, Turkey's economy grew steadily under Kemal's leadership. Between 1923 and 1938, industrial production increased by 80%, while the railroad network expanded from 4,000 to 7,000 kilometers. Turkey achieved remarkable economic progress without foreign loans, guided by Kemal's principle of economic independence. By 1930, Turkish women had gained the right to vote in local elections, and by 1934, they could vote and run for national office, earlier than in many Western democracies. Women entered professions previously closed to them, becoming doctors, lawyers, judges, and pilots. Kemal personally encouraged his adopted daughters to pursue careers, with one becoming Turkey's first female combat pilot. In October 1927, Kemal delivered his famous Nutuk speech, a 36-hour address over 6 days that narrated the Turkish national struggle and outlined his vision for the future. This monumental speech became a foundational text of Turkish nationalism, cementing Kemal's historical interpretation and political philosophy. In 1934, the Grand National Assembly bestowed upon Mustafa Kemal the surname Atatürk, meaning Father of Turks. This name reflected his role not just as a political leader, but as the symbolic patriarch of a reborn nation. Atatürk's famous dictum, "Peace at home, peace in the world," guided Turkey's foreign policy during this period. Rather than seeking to recover lost Ottoman territories or protect Muslim populations abroad, Turkey focused on securing its borders and developing diplomatic relations with former enemies. When Mustafa Kemal Atatürk died on November 10, 1938, the nation was plunged into mourning. His body was transported from Dolmabahce Palace in Istanbul to Ankara, with crowds lining the route to pay their respects. His legacy was secure. In just 15 years, he had transformed a defeated Ottoman remnant into a proud, independent republic with a distinct national identity. Atatürk was succeeded by his loyal lieutenant, İsmet İnönü, who guided Turkey through the dangerous waters of World War II. Maintaining neutrality until the final months, Turkey avoided the devastation that befell much of Europe and the Middle East. After the war, global pressures for democratization and İnönü's own commitment to Atatürk's vision led to Turkey's transition to a multi-party system. In 1950, the opposition Democratic Party won elections, marking the first peaceful transfer of power in the republic's history. The Democratic Party under Adnan Menderes represented rural and religious constituencies who had felt marginalized by Atatürk's secularist reforms. While maintaining the republican framework, Menderes relaxed some restrictions on religious expression, allowing the Arabic call to prayer again and building new mosques. Turkey's experiment with multi-party democracy faced its first major challenge in 1960 when the military, seeing itself as the guardian of Atatürk's secular legacy, staged a coup. Prime Minister Menderes was executed following a controversial trial. This established a troubling pattern in Turkish politics. When civilian governments strayed too far from Kemalist orthodoxy, the military intervened. The 1960s and 70s saw rapid economic and social change. Turkey industrialized rapidly and millions migrated from villages to cities. Istanbul's population exploded from about 1 million in 1950 to over 4 million by 1980. This urbanization created enormous social tensions as rural migrants brought traditional religious practices into urban settings. Political polarization intensified through the 1970s, with violent clashes between leftist and rightist groups claiming thousands of lives. The 1980 military coup brought this period of chaos to an end, but at a high cost to civil liberties and democratic development. The 1980s brought significant changes to Turkey's political and economic landscape. Under Turgut Özal, who became prime minister in 1983, Turkey embraced economic liberalization, opening its markets to global trade and investment. Özal, himself more openly religious than previous leaders, also initiated a subtle but significant shift in Turkey's relationship with its Islamic heritage. Religious education was expanded, more mosques were built, and expressions of religious identity became more visible in public life. The 1990s saw the rise of explicitly Islamic political movements, most notably the Welfare Party, led by Necmettin Erbakan. In 1996, Erbakan became Turkey's first Islamist prime minister, alarming secular elites who feared a reversal of Atatürk's legacy. The secular establishment, led by the military, forced Erbakan from power in what was called a post-modern coup in 1997. His party was banned and strict measures were implemented to roll back religious influence in public institutions. However, this intervention only temporarily halted the rise of political Islam in Turkey. Turkey entered the new millennium amid a devastating economic crisis. In 2001, the Turkish lira collapsed, inflation soared to over 50%, and unemployment reached record levels. This economic disaster discredited established political parties and created an opening for new political forces. In November 2002, the newly formed Justice and Development Party, AK Party, won a landslide electoral victory under the leadership of Recep Tayyip Erdoğan, a former mayor of Istanbul who had been imprisoned for reciting a religious poem. The AK Party represented a new synthesis in Turkish politics, combining Islamic values with a commitment to democracy, economic liberalization, and European integration. Initially portrayed as conservative Democrats rather than Islamists, they promised stability, economic growth, and respect for both religious and secular lifestyles. The first decade of AK Party rule brought unprecedented economic growth and stability. Between 2002 and 2012, Turkey's GDP tripled, inflation fell to single digits, and foreign investment poured in. A massive infrastructure program transformed Turkey's cities with new airports, highways, hospitals, and housing developments. Turkey's international position also strengthened during this period. Under the doctrine of strategic depth, developed by Foreign Minister Ahmet Davutoglu, Turkey sought to leverage its historical and cultural connections across the former Ottoman territories. Trade with Middle Eastern neighbors expanded dramatically, and Turkey became an increasingly influential regional power. In 2005, Turkey began formal negotiations for European Union membership, fulfilling a long-standing ambition of Turkish modernizers dating back to Atatürk. While progress was slow and ultimately stalled, the prospect of EU membership drove significant democratic reforms in the early AK Party years. By 2013, the initial honeymoon period of the AK Party era was ending. The Gezi Park protests erupted in Istanbul, initially over plans to redevelop one of the city's few remaining green spaces, but quickly expanding into a broader movement against what many saw as the government's increasingly authoritarian tendencies and conservative social policies. The most dramatic crisis came on July 15, 2016, when elements within the military attempted a coup against Erdogan's government. The coup failed when thousands of citizens took to the streets in defense of the elected government. The aftermath saw a massive purge of state institutions, with tens of thousands arrested or dismissed from their positions. Following the failed coup, Turkey held a constitutional referendum in 2017 that transformed the country from a parliamentary to a presidential system, significantly expanding Erdogan's powers. Critics argued this represented a departure from Atatürk's democratic vision, while supporters maintained it provided needed stability. Recent years have seen a remarkable reassessment of Turkey's Ottoman past. While Atatürk had emphasized pre-Islamic Turkish history and downplayed the Ottoman era, Erdogan has embraced Ottoman heritage as a source of national pride and legitimacy. Ottoman-era buildings have been restored, Ottoman Turkish is taught in some schools, and Ottoman symbols have returned to public spaces. Today's Turkey reflects both continuity and change from Atatürk's vision. The republic he founded remains intact, with its borders largely unchanged. Turkey maintains its democratic institutions even as their character has evolved. The military, once the self-appointed guardian of secularism, has been brought firmly under civilian control. Yet in other ways, contemporary Turkey represents a significant departure from Kemalist orthodoxy. Religious expression is far more visible in public life. Ottoman heritage is celebrated rather than downplayed, and Turkey's foreign policy is more assertive, particularly in former Ottoman territories. As we conclude our series on Islamic history, Turkey's journey from empire to republic offers several crucial lessons for understanding the modern Muslim world. First, the Turkish experience demonstrates that radical transformation is possible in Muslim societies, but comes with significant costs and contradictions. Atatürk's top-down modernization achieved remarkable results, but created enduring tensions between the secular state and religious society. Second, Turkey's story reveals the complex relationship between Islam and nationalism in the post-imperial age. The Ottoman Caliphate represented a transnational Islamic identity, while the Turkish Republic embraced a territorially bounded national identity. This tension between religious and national identity continues to shape politics across the Muslim world. Third, Turkey illustrates the ongoing challenge of balancing democratic principles with strong leadership. From Atatürk to Erdogan, Turkey has produced powerful leaders who pushed through transformative changes, sometimes at the expense of pluralistic democracy. Fourth, the Turkish case shows that modernization need not mean wholesale westernization. While early republican reforms closely followed Western models, contemporary Turkey has crafted a distinctive synthesis of Islamic values, nationalist pride, democratic institutions, and modern capitalism. Finally, Turkey's century-long journey reminds us that the relationship between tradition and modernity is not a one-time choice, but an ongoing negotiation. What began as a radical break with the Ottoman Islamic past has evolved into a more complex conversation about Turkish identity that continues to incorporate elements of that very heritage. As we've seen throughout this series, Islamic civilization has repeatedly demonstrated its resilience and adaptability across 14 centuries. The creation of modern Turkey represents one distinctive path through the challenges of modernity, neither the only path nor a perfect one, but a significant experiment in reimagining what an Islamic society can become in the modern world. From the fall of Baghdad to the rise of the Ottomans, from the colonial encounter to the struggle for independence, from the challenge of modernization to the emergence of contemporary Islamic movements, each episode in this series has explored a critical turning point that has shaped the world we live in today. I hope this journey through Islamic history has given you deeper insights into not just the past, but the present and future possibilities for Muslim societies around the globe. Thank you for joining me on this exploration. Before we close this final chapter in our journey, I want to sincerely thank you, our loyal viewers, for accompanying us through this exploration of Islamic history. From the early days of Islam to the modern Turkish Republic we've discussed today, we've traveled through 14 centuries together, examining the triumphs, challenges, and transformations that have shaped the Muslim world. When we began this series, we set out to understand not just what happened in Islamic history, but why it matters today. The story of modern Turkey encapsulates so many themes we've explored: the tension between tradition and innovation, the search for authentic identity in a changing world, and the ongoing conversation between Islamic values and modern realities. As Muslims and as global citizens, understanding this rich history helps us navigate our complex present. The past is never simply past. It lives on in our institutions, our cultural memories, and our ongoing debates about who we are and who we wish to become. I hope this series has provided you with new insights, challenged some assumptions, and deepened your appreciation for the remarkable civilizational journey of Islam. History is not a simple story of rise and fall, but rather a continuous process of adaptation, renewal, and reimagination. From all of us at AI Deen Vision, thank you for being part of this journey. Remember to subscribe if you haven't already, and share these episodes with friends and family who might benefit from this knowledge. Your support makes our work possible. As we say goodbye, I'm reminded of the words of Ibn Khaldun, the great Muslim historian. History is a discipline that has a great number of approaches. May our exploration of these many approaches to understanding our past help us build a more thoughtful and compassionate future. See you next time, inshallah. Allah Hafiz.